Alrighty, so today we're going to do the season preview of the Chicago Fire. Now, it feels like coming into this season, the Chicago Fire is pretty much running it back in terms of bringing almost the same roster as last season coming into this season with a couple of key departure and also making some big money out of those key departure and bringing a couple of addition during this off season. But for the most part, like I said, they pretty much are running it back in terms of putting the same roster that they feel last season and pretty much putting for this year too, which is kind of odd because this team did not make it to the playoffs last season. You rarely see teams that decided to run it back after a team did not get to the playoffs, and especially did not even came close in terms of making the playoffs. And I would also like to say that, for this upcoming season, I'm pretty sure Fire fans does not want a repeat of 2021 because this really feels eerily similar to the 2021 season where, coming off of a season where they pretty much just gone through a complete teardown and rebuilt the teams and kind of had a very expansion-like kind of season and kind of finished respectable in some ways, and they're hoping, heading into the second season of the core, it's going to do well, and it didn't, and that they basically torn it down and basically built a new core, and that that's where we are right now. And that again, I feel like I mentioned this before many times and I'll mention it again. I feel like if there's any franchise that deserve to see a team have a winning season, it's got to be the Chicago Fire, because I think ever since I started covering MLS back in 2018, I don't think the Chicago Fire has ever made it to the playoffs. I mean, look at this. Like, when you look at the last 5 seasons, did not make it to the playoffs, 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 and did not make it to the playoffs. I think this is going to be the only team I'll talk about in the season preview where they basically didn't make it to the playoffs in their past 5 seasons, and that I think they have the longest active playoff drought out of any team. So there's no doubt that I think if you're a Fire fans, I mean, I know there's not a lot that are very optimistic about this season, but you got to say that, you gotta think this maybe is finally the season that they break through. But yet, like I said, with the way that they're kind of running it back, and as I mentioned, with those key departure, that despite they make some money out of those players that they sold off in the off season, maybe it's not a great idea when they decide to sell them for asset and don't even think about potentially replacing them heading into this season. But nevertheless, last season they finished with a 10-9-15 record and finished with 39 points. They finished 12th last season, and as I mentioned, did not make it to the playoffs. The previous season finished 12th also with a 9-7-18 record, and they also did not make it to the playoffs with 34 points. And again, that was the season where they just decided that the core that they built during the COVID shortened season just did not work. They completely gone through a teardown. And then in 2020, in that COVID shortened season, they finished 11 with a 5-8-10 record and with 23 points. And then in 2019, they came the closest in terms of making the playoffs, finishing just outside of the playoffs with an 8th place finish, and by far finishing with the most points that they had out of the last 5 seasons with 42 points and a 10-12-12 record. But then in 2018, they finished 10th in the standings with an 8-18 record and have 32 points. And it's not just the fact that this team has had a long playoff drought, but it's just the fact that besides 2017 when they finished 3rd in the standings, I don't even remember the last time the Fire made it to the playoffs prior to that 2017 run. I mean, this franchise, like I said, if you want to talk about probably the franchise that has the worst luck year after year, it's got to be the Chicago Fire. I mean, this decade, starting from the 2010s, now even extending into the 2020s, has been just like Fire fans have known nothing but misery in terms of how this team has been playing. Now, in terms of some of the addition that they made, of course, as much as I said that they kind of did run it back, they did add a couple of players. One of their big acquisition that they made this offseason is this guy called Arne Sarkid, a French right back that, I think he is probably going to be one of the starter for this team, knowing the amount that they of course got him from. And then speaking of starter, you also got Jeff Gall, who again, it'll be interesting to see whether or not if he is indeed the replacement for Gaga Slolina in that goalkeeping spot. Because besides that, I think they also have Chris Brady and Spencer Ritchie in terms of the goalkeeping spot. And I would also think that, all three of those goalkeepers will be battling for that spot. But I have a feeling it may be Jeff Gall be the one that will be the starting goalkeeper for this team. They also got Jonathan Dean from Birmingham Legion. And then they also got Maran Halil Salisi from FC Lugano. No, and he's going to be one of those guys that I think could be used as depth pieces on the attacking end, especially on the wing. Now, in terms of some of the players that they lost, yeah, they lost some key players, and probably the most important player that they lost last season, besides Gaga Slolina, is Johan Duran. He, of course, went to Aston Villa for a close record transfer fee that we have ever seen, or a close to a not just a club record transfer fee. I mean, it was actually a club record transfer fee in terms of outbound transfer for the Chicago Fire, but just one of the biggest outbound transfer fee we have ever seen in MLS history. Over $18 million with add-ons up to $21 million, and rightfully so, because when you see how he played, especially when he was given the chance, he was a guy that was a man on fire, and I was kind of surprised they maybe would like to hold on to him for another season, because this could be a guy that if he looks anything like he was during the latter part of the season, especially this, well, not the latter part, but the second half of the season, he could be a guy that easily could be a 10 or 15 plus goal scored in this league. And then they also have the other Johan that left, and Johan Espinoza. They also are no longer having long time Chicago Fire defender Jonathan Bornstein. They also let go of Boris Seklic, Stanislav Ivanov, two guys that were part of the old regime in terms of, or not really the old regime, but probably part of the old core that they tried to form back in 2020 that failed spectacularly. And then, of course, one of the other key departure is Gaga Slolina, but we kind of knew that from last season after he signed a pre-contract with Chelsea. Now, in terms of the strength of this team, I still think it's definitely the back line of this team. I mean, I think last season, the reason why the Chicago Fire was not having a good season was mainly due to the fact that they just did not score enough goals. Like, the goal scoring was a major problem for this team, and that there was time that the back line really bailed out this team. And part of that has to do with the fact that Gaga Slolina was making some big saves. But when you also look at the back line, they have a decent back line too. I mean, Rafael Shiho's probably one of the best center back that I don't think is giving enough appreciation, and that they also had Wyatt Omsper there before he went down with an injury, and Wyatt Omsper was playing very well for the Fire before he went down with an injury. So yeah, with him coming back, that's going to be a big boost in terms of this back line in general. And then, of course, the weakness is definitely on the attack and maybe the goalkeeping, depending on, how they're going to do and how Ezra Henriksen is going to potentially name the starting goalkeeper for the opening weekend, or the opening match for them in the 2023 regular season. But obviously the attack is definitely a weakness because, like I said, they had a lot of trouble in terms of scoring goals last season, and losing a key piece like Johan Duran, that is going to be one that's going to be tough for the Fire to swallow. Now, speaking of goal scoring, that is probably the first big question that I have with this team, is that where's the goal going to come from this team? Because, when you look at this attack, it's kind of a weirdly formed attack. I mean, on paper, when you look at the names, it looked like it could be a good attack. I mean, Xherdan Shaqiri is a guy that can definitely provide a spark to this team. Now, the only question is, can they keep him healthy? Because that was an issue last season. It's kind of also been an issue for him throughout his career. And then, of course, on the other end, you got Chris Mueller, who, despite the fact that, when Mueller came to the Fire, and at first he definitely provided a spark to this attack, it kind of started to fizzle out, and he really didn't do that well as the season goes along. And then on the other side, you got João Torres, not having a very good season last year. Many even consider him to be a bust. And then when you look at the number 9 position, I mean, again, losing Joran Duran, that's gonna hurt in a way where they're gonna have to rely on Kasper Schmeichel. And Kasper Schmeichel, I will say that when he's on, he's definitely on. But when he basically is not on, or he's basically going to that funk, which we have seen him him done before with this team and also with the Philadelphia Union, yeah, it can be a very frustrating thing to see, especially when you have him on the team. So again, it's hard to see where the goal is going to come from, and especially how is this going to attack going to be any better than what I saw last season. Again, the only addition they have on the attack is Maran Halis Salisi, and again, he's more of a player that I think it could be a depth player rather than maybe just a regular starter, unless if he play well enough where he can maybe take that spot that Chris Mueller currently has in the left wing area. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of question in terms of the fact that I don't think they really improve in the attack. In fact, I would say maybe they kind of got worse because of losing such a key piece like John Duran. And then, of course, the goalkeeping situation. Like, I'm assuming it's going to be Jeff Gold that's going to be the starting goalkeeper, and that it's going to be interesting to see how he's going to do coming in and have to replace some big shoes that Gaga Slonina left. Again, anytime when you lose a generation of talent goalkeeper like what the Fire just experienced, losing Slonina is going to be tough. And I don't expect any of these goalkeeper on the Fire depth chart is going to be anywhere close to similar to what Gaga Slonina did. I mean, I think the Fire are just hoping they might be get themselves in the same situation that the Revs found themselves last year, where they lost Matt Turner, but then they brought in this guy called Georgi Petrovic, and boom, he not only has similar quality as Matt Turner, but even some might say that he's just a tinsy bit better than what Matt Turner was doing his time with the Revs. So I think Fire fans are hoping that's going to be the same case for Jeff Gall, because besides that, Chris Brady, he's a young American in a U.S. Youth 20 player that he's okay, but no, he's definitely not at the same quality as what I think Gaga Sloan, or even close to being that. And then Spencer Ritchie has always been just kind of a backup goalkeeper. He's been a mediocre kind of goalkeeper at best in the starting role. So I think this is definitely going to be fall on Jeff Gall, and that we'll see how he's going to do. And then, of course, the other big question for this team is the fact that will they once again blow it up if this doesn't work out? And this is where, again, this season is kind of crucial in a way where they have to simply make the playoffs. If they do not make the playoffs again, I think once again we're going to see the same situation that we saw back in 2021. They're just going to completely blow it up. They're going to fire their head coach and most likely in the front office and the GM Rowan Greg hit. He's probably gonna be end up in the chopping block too. And as much as that's just a way to maybe start off fresh again. That's been the story of the Chicago Fire for the past couple of years. It's always been they trying to go for a rebuild and thinks that they shape up a core, and then it just turns out to disaster and then tore it down. And they're just stuck in this cycle that I think this is probably like the most nightmare cycle that a team can get stuck into, just being a team that is just constantly rebuilding and just aren't able to shape up a decent core before tearing it down again. So I think again this season, this is a crucial year for the Chicago Fire, because I don't see how they're going to keep this roster again if it doesn't work out again this season, and that they're going to have to do what they did in 2021. And also, as a bonus question, because like I said, I've been doing bonus questions so far with these season previews I've done, is how hot the seat would be with Ezra Henriksen and Greg Hitt. So as I mentioned, these two names there, I think they could be in a very hot seat. I mean, Ezra Henriksen maybe not too much. I mean, I think last season he did try his best in terms of getting this team to do well, but it didn't quite work out. But I think the seat is much hotter in Greg's Hitt's seat, because again, this is a guy that I think he was given one last opportunity on one more season to get this right, and if they don't get this right, I just don't see how he's going to come back. Like, there's already some Fire fans that started to be very frustrated with how Greg Hitz has built this roster and the amount of time he has failed to get this roster to be a competitive team, and I don't think he's going to be back if this team does fail again. And again, going back to what I said about how they're probably going to blow it up again if this team does not make it to the playoffs, or at least be competitive in terms of making the playoffs for this upcoming season. But there you have it. That is pretty much it for my season preview of the Chicago Fire. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this season preview? And if you're a Chicago Fire fan, what do you think is this season going to look like, and your expectation for this season? I mean, it has to be playoffs in terms of the expectation for this team. But let me know in the comments below. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.